Hi, this is Joe Ziemba, the host of When Football Was Football here on the Sports History Network. Aside from my podcasting duties, I'm also a sports collector. And as such, I'm very pleased to share the exciting news that the Sports History Network has partnered with Rochester Sports Autographs, the largest JSA authenticated autograph distributor in the United States, where you can get deals on over 30,000 autograph sports collectibles. So as a collector, I was very pleased when I visited the site of Rochester Sports Autographs. The massive inventory is easy to search, carefully documented, and visually appealing. The options seem limitless, whether you're looking for an autographed baseball, signed football helmets, or basketball jerseys, among thousands of others. I found everything from a Babe Ruth autograph, a signed football by Dick Butkus, and an autographed Larry Bird basketball jersey. And as a collector, you'll be delighted with the very competitive pricing on JSA authenticated products. Made possible since RSA deals directly with athletes, so there's no extra markup, and the savings are passed on directly to the customer. Perhaps you're looking for an early gift for Mother's Day or Father's Day. Heck, who needs a holiday as an excuse to give a piece of sports history to your loved ones? Or how about yourself? Today seems like a great day to add to your own sports collection, right? RSA even has film, music, and other entertainment autographs on the site, so there's something for everyone. All orders from Rochester Sports Autographs are top quality and shipped to your door with top authentication and a money-back guarantee. And to make sure RSA knows that the Sports History Network sent you, we created a special link for you. All you need to do is head to shoprsa.com/SHN. That's shoprsa.com/SHN to get your own piece of sports history today.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. On January 12, 1967, Dr. James Bedford became the first person to be cryonically preserved with the intent of future resuscitation. He still remains preserved at the Alcor Life Extension Foundation. My thought is he must have been a Detroit Lions fan because he knew he'd have to wait a while before he could see his first Super Bowl victory. And this was relevant because 3 days later, we would have the first ever Super Bowl.
Welcome to the Football History Dude Podcast, where each episode is a journey back in time to learn about the rich history of the NFL. Your host is Arnie Chapman. Football is his passion, and he wants you to come along with him to explore the yesteryear of the gridiron. So hop on board his DeLorean, and let's get this baby up to 88 miles per hour.
Great Scott! This time as we step out the DeLorean, the date is January 15th, 1967. This is the date of the first ever Super Bowl between the Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, I mean, we all know it wasn't really called the Super Bowl back then. It was actually called the AFL-NFL World Championship Game. And almost 60 years later, Dr. James Bedford, an obvious Lions fan, is still waiting to see that Super Bowl for his favorite team. We're feeling like maybe we have a chance at least a little bit. And maybe not next year, maybe the year after. We'll see. Either way, I digress because this year we have a Super Bowl to watch. It's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. Will Andy Reid take down his former beloved team? Or will the Eagles fans get to see their team host their second ever Lombardi Trophy? Speaking of the time this episode releases, which is on a Wednesday, before the big game, this means that the teams are in hardcore final preparation mode for the upcoming game. That's why we bring on this week's guest, Kevin Bryant. He's here to talk a little espionage history throughout the Super Bowl. Something that, well, I mean, it obviously happens. Whether it's pushing over the moral lines or if it's just kind of one of those things where everybody does it like game film. Either way, we'll get into some of those stories here with Kevin in a minute. But first, let me tell you about his book, Spies on the Sidelines, The High-Stakes World of NFL Espionage. This book has been out for, like 6 months or so, something like that. near the beginning of the NFL season, back in 2022, way back there in 2022, that is. We had Kevin, speaking 2022, back on episode 201 in July of last year. Now, if you haven't listened to that episode, of course, finish this one off because it's going to be relevant for both. But I recommend you heading back to episode 201 to be able to listen to that episode. But even beyond that, Kevin has made, I guess you could say he took the Sports History Network circuit and the tour because he's been on many of our other podcasts as well. Sports History Network for you is a group of podcasters that have a mission to create the headquarters for sports yesteryear, primarily through the medium of podcasting, but we are dabbling in the YouTube space. You got a bunch of blog articles over on the website. Well, whatever you got to do, you know what? Head over to sportshistorynetwork.com to learn more about what we have going on. And now this week, we're going to talk a little bit more about spying, specifically from a Super Bowl perspective and maybe some of the things that have happened in the history of the Super Bowl. So sit back and let's get to the interview with Kevin Bryant. Let's just start right there. I mean, with the topic around your book and spying on the Super Bowl. I mean, how is the update on the book? How has it been going for the release so far?
Yeah, really well. It's kept me busy, man. I've been on just a ton of podcasts, radio shows, all of that. It's hard because you don't really have that great of a feel for how well you're doing in book sales at any time until you get your first royalty statement, which for me is it's a year after the book releases. So it's kind of crazy. And I was kind of getting frustrated with everything, kind of had a down week last week. And this week, a New York professor reached out to me, and NYU professor, and was like, hey, we want to buy, your book by the box loads. I'm like, oh, okay. So, it gives you a little bit of energy and you get going again. It's, I'm sure you know how it's like that with everybody's job. Sometimes,
oh yeah,
sometimes it's going real well, and other times you're like, it's a struggle. Yep.
I mean, even with this podcast too, and I mean, I mentioned before we started the interview, and hey, spoiler alert, people that are listening to this show, I'm starting another one, and it's going to be released sometime after this episode releases. I don't know yet the timing, and it's not that I don't like doing this show at all. It's just the fact of I've always been interested in this. Then it just comes in waves, like you said. You have a whole bunch of things come in, and then sometimes it feels like the daily grind. And you're like, oh, here's another thing. Podcaster I used to listen to, and I still kind of dibble at a school of podcasts. And he always says, feel for your, gives you a little bit of gas in your tank, kind of thing. You gave me one of the, I guess you could say, surprises or the cool things. But like, what was the biggest surprise for you during this book release launch?
Well, a few things. I mean, to me, the most interesting thing when it comes to the releases, you think like you've got all these ideas in your head about how everything's going to work as a first-time author. And so for me, it was like, hey, if I can get on some big podcasts and some big radio shows, it's going to sell, books by the dozen, and it doesn't really happen. It's a very slow process. What being on podcasts and, and shows, especially when you get on like, ESPN and all that kind of stuff on the radio, is it allows you to use that for marketing. So, which builds onto other things. So I've actually found that promoting the book has been much more effective to do it as a textbook for university courses than it has been trying to sell to, general audience NFL fans. So it's just really interesting. Like, it's like any other game, it's like going into war with a plan, it's good until the first shot is fired. And that's how I feel about, trying to promote this book is gone. It's, constantly adjusting and readjusting, to figure out, what suits you and the way your publisher does business and, how your book fits into the world at large. So
why do professors find that they want to use this as a textbook? Like, what angle are they taking on?
Yeah, so it's gone real sports management courses. There's a lot, leadership, ethics, even introduction to sport management, legal issues, all of that. And then there's ethics courses, there's business ethics courses, business law courses. So, the book and the subject matter touches on a bit of all of those. And the beautiful thing about, selling to professors is you're selling by the class load. times the number of classes they have, times the number of semesters that they use it for. So, if you can sell one book, you're selling by the tens or by the hundreds, which is really nice.
Another thing that's kind of cool about it too is I could see why from their world, and then their students, it's almost like they're tricking them to learning some of these things. And the guest that I had just recently, it's like they're going to learn about a topic, but it's through the eyes of the NFL or whatever it might be. But so they're having fun doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all been there. We've all been in those courses where you've got a dry textbook, that talks about in the theories of everything and how it works. And I think what my book offers is, a bit of a case study. Okay, let's get out of the dry in theory. This is the reality. This is how things really go down in corporate America and how cutthroat it can be trying to get that advantage and trying to earn that extra, earn those extra dollars.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of cutthroat, we have the biggest game of the year coming up here in a couple of weeks, which is why we brought you back and spying on the Super Bowl. So I guess maybe let's start off there. Is it more common than people think even nowadays?
So nowadays, yes. I mean, it absolutely still goes on. And we talked before, my book's not just about all the nefarious means that teams use to try to gain advantage. It's, it goes through everything from what's permissible to what's questionable to what's illicit. So if you're asking, the illicit techniques, does that stuff still go on? Yes. Has it gone on in the past? Yes. And probably more so in the past. But yeah, I mean, I think, the Rams, Patriots Super Bowl was a great example of that type of nefarious, shady stuff. It's still going on, but then you have all the permissible stuff, the film study that's going through the newspaper, and I've got stories about those, how those techniques have helped Super Bowl teams, gain the advantage and make a huge, huge difference, during the game as well.
So, yeah, I mean, there's I don't even know what the right word is. You explained it to me in my last episode, and let's go. Okay, so here's a scenario where Andy Reid is considering it's the Chiefs and the Eagles. He's going to go back to his old Philly cheesesteak shop stand, and he's going to tell the guy here, pull your cart up next to the practice field and maybe get a sound. So what type of word would that be?
Yeah. So, I mean, that sounds crazy, but, so I'll give you two examples. Okay. Of just, how a team can spy on another team. For example, doing that. So the first one, we got to go, all the ways back a little bit, 1958. So the greatest game ever played, NFL championship game, right? So we got the Baltimore Colts going up against the Giants, and Weeb Ewbank, who is the coach of the Colts, he wants to try to get some sort of advantage because they had lost during the regular season to the Giants in New York, where they're going to be playing the Super Bowl again. Okay, they lost by 3 points in a super close game. So how do we make up those 3 points? That's the question Weeb Ewbank needs to answer. So he says, you know what? We need to spy on their practice and know what they're going to do. That's how we're going to get an advantage. So he asks his assistant coach, Bob Shaw. He says, Bob, I need you to go spy on a practice. Bob's like, I don't really feel great about this, So Carol Rosenblum, the owner of the Colts, then comes up to Bob Shaw and says, Bob, we need you to go spy on that practice, okay? And everybody knows that Carol Rosenblum was a pretty hardcore owner. If you got on his bad side, you were looking for another job, okay? So Bob's like, all right, I guess I'm going to do this. But he's still like hemming and hawing. And Carol says, you know what, Bob? Here's what I'm going to do, okay? I'm a wealthy man. If you get caught spying and the NFL kicks you out of here and you're banned for life, okay? I'm going to give you a job. It may not be with the NFL, but I'm going to give you a job and make sure that you and your family are fine. So Bob says, all right, okay, I can live with this. Okay, so, so he goes and he does. He goes up on the roof of a building that overlooks the Giants practice field, and he spies on them. He didn't get anything too big, nothing great. But what it did, it allowed Weeb Ewbank to know that, hey, the Giants really don't have anything new that they're going to throw at you. Okay. So prepare from what you can see on film, and you should be good, which he does. And it ends up being a tie game at the end, and then goes into overtime, and the Colts, win a fantastic game. And, so that's one example. Okay. Now everyone's going, well, okay, that was 1958. That's a long time ago. Okay. So to bring it up to, up to more recent times. So the Rams, Patriots Super Bowl. Okay. So what you've got there is, the Rams and the Patriots are practicing in the exact same spot. Okay. And it's the day before the Super Bowl, right? Everyone's both teams are doing their walkthrough practice. Okay. The Patriots go first. They hold their practice. The Rams are up next. Everyone from the Patriots leaves except for a couple of people, a couple of videographers. Okay. Which aren't filming anything. They're just hanging out in the stands. Okay. And apparently, per Roger Goodell, okay, the Rams staff was aware that these guys were hanging around. And they even had, Patriots paraphernalia on them. Okay. So the Rams do their whole walkthrough practice with these guys there, which is a huge, huge, huge mistake. Okay. Because what Belichick wants to know more than anything is, how is the Rams running back Marshall Faulk going to be utilized? Okay. And during the walkthrough practice, he finds out. Okay. Because they show Marshall Faulk returning a kickoff. They show Marshall Faulk, catching passes in the flat. They show red zone plays, which they're going to run in the game. And so when they're done, this videographer, one of them goes back and debriefs the Patriots defensive coordinator and says, hey, guess what I saw? This is what you can prep for, okay? And so all of this stuff comes out years later, and, everybody I think the Rams were pretty convinced that the Patriots had taped a practice leading up to the game to get all this information, but they hadn't. They just spied on the practice. And this is something that the Patriots have a habit of doing. Belichick has a son on the staff who has been kicked out of at least another team's practice for doing this exact same thing, which, so it's nothing new. It's obviously something that's been going on for a while, something that had gone on after that Super Bowl as well. So yeah, if you can slip a spy in here or there on another team's practice, it's very beneficial. And, sometimes you got to do it super secretively, like the Colts did before the 58 Super Bowl. And other times you can just look like, you know what? Hey, there's nothing to see here. I belong here. It's all good. You just go there and you be confident, right? And sometimes, as stupid as that sounds, that can work for you. And hiding in plain sight is sometimes the best strategy.
You mentioned earlier about let's go way back to the 58 championship. How long ago first question, how long have teams been using game film that you're aware of? And then second question, was it initially just a spying tactic and then it turned into everybody eligible, or was it at the beginning everybody pretty much had access?
Yeah, so, the use of film really goes all the way back to Sid Gilman and the Chargers. And he was really the first one to start, I think he had a brother that used to work in a movie theater. And so before the movies, they used to show film of games from around the league. And so what Sid Gilman would happen to get a hold of those reels from his brother, and then he would splice together the film from it and start studying what other teams were doing. And obviously it developed from there. And as TV came along and became more prominent, and as we moved from, as film advanced, and obviously, you move from VHS to digital was another huge step and all that. It becomes easier and easier and easier to do. So that's kind of where it developed up to the point where we are today, where teams can, with the right software, which they can buy, they can literally punch in like Eagles, 3rd and 1, and it will bring up, and you punch in the year, 2023, and it will show you all the 3rd and 1 plays that the Eagles have ran in 2023. And it's just such a resource for coaches and staffs to be able to prep and do the advanced scouting for the teams that they're going to play.
Yeah, I mean, even as fans, we have that access now to the different, I think it's even called like Coaches Cam or something on the NFL Game Pass.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's really nice. I've had that before.
I mean, I had it and I didn't even utilize it to the fullest extent. But I mean, you bring up a point where it turns into, I could punch a 3rd and 1, 2023 or whatever it may be for the Eagles. And at what point does it turn into, I mean, it's the same playing field because everybody has the same software, but then you're like really trying to find the analysts and the guys that can really see the, the habits that teams have and everything. I mean, is there any moments where it's almost like a Benedict Arnold, like they were with the team for so long and then all of a sudden, either halfway through the season or whatever it might have been, they switch teams?
Yeah, there's a really good example of that actually going back to Weeb Ewbank. So, the guy who was involved here in this 1958 greatest game ever played. So before he joined the Colts, he was on Paul Brown's staff with the Cleveland Browns, right? And so he gets a job offer from the Colts. And Paul Brown's not thrilled about it, probably because Weeb Ewbank's a heck of a coordinator. But, eventually he's like, yeah, of course, okay, you're taking the job, I got it. But what he does is he goes to the NFL commissioner and he says, hey, commish, Weeb Ewbank has been in charge of preparing us, the Cleveland Browns, for the upcoming NFL draft. I would like to keep him until the draft takes place because of that. And the commissioner says, yep, go right ahead. I think it's fair. Okay? So the Browns go start the draft. Well, guess who's drafting just a couple picks before them every round? Okay? It's those darn pesky Colts. Okay? And guess who starts flying off the draft boards? Every single pick. Whoever the Colts are targeting, whoever the Browns are targeting, their pick is going to the Colts. And so this goes on a couple rounds before Paul Brown's like, hey, we got a problem. And so he's got he figures it out pretty quickly. And he's like, well, most likely this is Weeb Ewbank passing on this information, but I don't know how. Because at that time, all the teams are together in one building, sitting around various tables. And Weeb Ewbank's not going anywhere. And he doesn't see any Colts members of their coaching staff coming up to Weeb and talking. Eventually, after watching closely, he figures out that there is a journalist from that area, a Colts journalist who is repeatedly stopping by and talking to Weeb. And he figures out, that's how the information is going to get passed, okay? So Paul Brown writes in one of his, in a book, that, he later confronted Weeb Ewbank, who said, I did it for my family. Probably implying it was for the money. Which, whether that's true or not, it's Paul Brown versus, that's Paul Brown's word, who seems like a pretty trustworthy guy, but there's no definitive answer ever from Weeb Ewbank, no confession or anything of those sorts. But that's just one example of, you've really got a spy inside of one team, providing information to another, which seems pretty crazy, but, that's gone on a few times in the NFL's history.
You mentioned the journalist was helping essentially. What about the media as a whole, maybe back then, but even nowadays, like how much has come out that's even been relevant?
Yeah, so that's a huge concern in a few aspects. So one, there's the concern that the media could be working directly for another team. So, and I'll give you an example. Al Davis used to work the media better than anybody. And he used to basically play, let's trade secrets. I'll tell you a little bit about our Raiders if you're willing to tell me a little bit about let's say the Rams, this one journalist covers the Rams or the Broncos or whoever it is, right? And of course, is Al Davis, is he even providing legitimate information? Is he providing information that he's basically, said, I'm willing to give this, but in return, I'm going to get something better. So nation states do this all the time, information sharing agreements. And it's the same sort of deal. That's, kind of what Al Davis is doing. So there's that threat. There's also, do you have a spy? Al Davis kicked out Woody Page, who was a Broncos journalist, before a big game because he was worried that Woody Page was a spy for the Broncos. Kicked him out of the Raiders headquarters. You've also got fears of information that can be unintentionally released by the media. And this type of stuff, it happens all the time. And this is the reason why coaches typically ban media members from practices, or at least, after the first 10, 15 minutes of warm up, they'll typically kick them out because that happens. And to give you an example of this, prior to the 94 Super Bowl, so Cowboys coaches were just hanging out, watching a newscast about an upcoming game, a newscast where they were live from a Buffalo Bills practice. And their quarterback, Jim Kelly, was caught on film in the background throwing a shovel pass to Thurman Thomas, the Bills running back. Now, the Bills had never thrown a shovel pass all year. So the Cowboys were like, whoa, we haven't seen that on film. So guess what they knew what to prep for, right? And they did, and they had their defense all ready for it. And so when it took place in the game, they actually managed to, the line was ready for it immediately. They hit Thurman Thomas right away and forced the fumble during a Super Bowl game. A huge play, because they knew it was coming up off of film. So that's another big reason that the media is, coaches are very leery about what they do and what they say around the media. There's also concern just of, as a coach or as a player, I might just leak information accidentally. So teams are really paranoid and coaches are really paranoid about what they say. And so, the NFL forces coaches to have these interviews with the media, which nothing ever comes out of it because no one wants to give away any secrets, right? So to give you an example of how silly it can be, during a 1968 press conference before the Super Bowl, a sports journalist named Jimmy Cannon asked the Raiders coach, Johnny Rosh, he said, if I held a gun to your head and you had to answer the question, what do you do more on offense, run or pass? What would you say? Remember, there's a gun at your head and you've got to answer. And Rosh replied, I'd say we tried to balance our offense. And all the media members in the room, just said, bang, but coaches are willing to suffer hypothetical deaths, to protect, information even as basic as that, because they're so paranoid of giving anything away to the media that could tip off another team.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we wanted to talk about too. Like, what are some of the safeguards or the defense mechanisms, or how do coaches and teams protect against this potential spying?
Yeah, so, obviously there's a lot of spying techniques, so I can't get into all of them. Also, let's take, spying on practices. I think that's a, favorite topic for a lot of people. And I've got a pretty, I think it's a pretty funny story anyway. So, prior to the Broncos-Packers Super Bowl in '98, the Super Bowl was being held in San Diego. And Mike Shanahan, the coach of the Broncos, really didn't like the fact that there was this big hill overlooking the practice field where they were at. And he thought, man, if I was the Packers and I wanted to spy, I'd be up there on that hill somewhere, right? So he's in San Diego. Okay, so what does he do? Well, there's a lot of, Marines and Special Forces type over here. So he goes and employs 18 Navy SEALs to secure this hilltop. Okay? Which sounds ridiculous, but it gets even more ridiculous because when Pat Bowlen, the Broncos owner, he's there when a news helicopter flies over the Broncos practice. And he says, it looked like Mike Shanahan expected these Navy SEALs to shoot a surface-to-air missile at this helicopter, knock it out of the sky. He was so ticked off and just looking at, why aren't you doing something? Do something about this, secure this place. And so, coaches are paranoid and, it may seem ridiculous, but, coaches have long feared helicopters, planes flying overhead, and even drones. Drones are the big things nowadays, obviously. So, but yeah, teams they're going to the nth degree to secure everything, when it comes to the game plans, when it comes to plays, the Philly special play versus in the game with the Patriots, the Super Bowl Patriots and Eagles, right? So Eagles coach comes up with a great play. They call it the Philly special. Okay. Where, their quarterback ends up being the receiver and catching the ball on a short goal line play. Well, they didn't want to show the Patriots. Like the Patriots, they're like, they're going to, the thought was, if we even execute this play in practice, the Patriots are going to see it. Okay. So the Eagles did not even practice this play ever. From the time it was designed to the time it was used in the Super Bowl, it was never practiced.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Okay. So yeah. So they talked about it. Okay. They did all that, but they were so paranoid the Pats were going to steal it. They didn't do it. So that's, it just shows, these guys and these coaches, man, it gets wild and it gets crazy. And, you've got coaches that literally won't even talk in the locker room. Coaches that will literally, one player was quoted as saying, you would have thought you walked into a school of the deaf if you came into our locker room, because the coach was trying to mime, the words and what he wanted to say. It gets pretty silly and pretty funny at times.
I wonder about with, because so much is digital now and in the cloud and or whatever kind of hacking. Did that get brought up at all as far as like hacking into systems or any other safeguards?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we already know what's going on in baseball, right? So we've had one team hack into another team's system and steal all kinds of crazy draft info. And the guy who did it actually is, I forget how long his prison sentence was, but it was lengthy. It was a good chunk of time. I actually spoke to a drone expert I was talking to him about all things drone and the threats of drones. But one of the things he brought up was he's like, Kevin, here's what we could do. He's like, I work with a company that we do all this, all this kind of crazy stuff. And we try to protect and, ensure this type of stuff can't go on for private sector businesses. But here's what we could do. Okay. It would be this simple. I could take a drone. I could fly it over another team's practice. Okay. And they would never know it's there. Okay. We could paint the bottom of it so it blends in with the sky perfectly. Okay. He's like, all these different steps we could use to make sure this drone is never seen or heard. And then, okay, we could put software that will allow that drone to suck up anything that is available. If a device is connected to Wi-Fi, we can suck up anything that is on that device. I was like, well, what if it's going to be protected versus, he's like, Kevin, it doesn't matter. I can suck it right off. He's like, it's gone. So if you put a playbook on there and it's connected to Wi-Fi, zoop, gone. So yes, that is a concern. It is a legitimate concern. How far teams go with all of that to protect it, I will tell you, the smart ones, if I was a team, I would pretty much keep everything off of a network. I would transport everything more or less thumb drives, burn it to DVDs, transport from standalone computers to standalone, meaning those computers are not connected to the internet. And I would have if I needed to do internet research, I would have separate computers for those that never ever saw, you never put anything that's game related or has, sensitive team information on those. And that it sounds pretty paranoid, but from people that work, I've got 20 plus years of experience collecting and protecting information for the Department of Defense. And I'm telling you, those are the safeguards that need to be put in place if you really are serious about protecting your information.
Wow. I mean, that's crazy even just to think that the audacity myself think for somebody to go and do that, though, to just be willing to go and steal that. I mean, it's what's that as opposed to even spying on somebody? You're just using a different technology, your eyes or binoculars versus you're still the act of going about trying to spy in illicitly. Wait, is illicit? Is that the right word? Illegally?
Yeah, I think illicit. Yeah, no, I think illicit's good. Well, so, illicit just means like it breaks NFL rules or bylaws. Okay. But it doesn't necessarily imply that there's any criminal wrongdoing. Now, let's, hacking into another team's database or putting a listening device in their locker room. Well, not only do those violate NFL rules and policies, but those break, state or even national laws. So, that opens up a whole nother, that opens up the Pandora's box, and it can get real interesting real fast. And that's where, when I was talking earlier about, promoting the book to sports laws and ethics courses, because you get those types of questions and conversations. And even if the question comes up, is the NFL and our NFL teams, are they their own companies? Can they really spy against each other legally and be held accountable legally for that? Because aren't they just franchises of the same company?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is how it's set up, isn't it?
Yes,
well, they also have their own organizations, though, in a way. So yeah, I really don't know.
Right. So it's a complex subject, right? And it gets really interesting legally. And so yeah, those are big questions. And so very often teams are very aggressive offensively because, a team like the Patriots, because what if we get caught? It's this big gray area that hasn't really been resolved, right? And what's the most that's going to happen legally? Well, someone's going to slap their hand and then say, okay, well, we probably need to actually, we'll rule on this and then there'll be some precedent. But since there was no precedent the first time around, chances are everything's going to go pretty easy on you. So, so the Patriots were accused of doing stuff like sneaking personnel into other teams' locker rooms to steal, their play sheets that had the upcoming first, 10 or 15 plays to start the game. Yeah, they would, former Patriots coaches came out and anonymously said, yeah, Spygate wasn't even the big thing that we used to do. That wasn't the scary thing. The best thing that we used to do was steal these play sheets. That was a huge advantage. So, they get away with it and they're willing to press the envelope because in the end, what happened? Okay, well, they lost a few draft picks because of a few things. But, what kind of advantage did they get? They did Spygate stuff from 2000 to 2007. They were taping, they were doing that. So, and you have to wonder, how long were they, putting people, spying on other practices with people in there? How long were they, getting into other teams' locker rooms? How many times were they doing things that we have no idea? They've been accused even of, using listening devices on players, miking up players to be able to hear stuff that's going on potentially in the huddle of another team or even at the line of scrimmage. So as a quarterback calls an audible, well, guess what? They can tape all of that and then match it up with a film later and say, oh, okay, well, this is the call for this. So next time we play him, we know we got it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and again, at that time, it's like they're not necessarily breaking any laws by any means, but at this, that's definitely goes against any kind of ethics.
Right.
But what about when the coaches leave? Because the people, I mean, it's not like only one, the snake, or the head of the snake's not the only one that knows this is going on. Any of these other coaches that leave for some reason, how has that not been disseminated before 2007 or nowadays? I don't understand that.
Right. So it's a big cat and mouse game that teams play. So you want to change. You want to gradually change, like especially, your plays and your play calls over time. Because eventually your opponents are going to learn this as coaches and as players go from one team to another. Okay. But if you try to do it all at once, okay, how many plays does a team run? Okay, quite a few. So if you try to change it between week 14 and 15, guess what happens? All your players get confused and they have no idea what the heck's going to happen. So typically teams don't do that. What they will most likely do is change a couple plays before a game, before every game, just to keep evolving and changing things. Now, what you can do, let's say, okay, so if I'm the Chargers head coach and we're about to play the Broncos, I can say, you know what? The Broncos just signed one of our former players, and we know they're going to debrief him and try to suck out all the secrets, including some of our plays, okay? But he's going to know this play right here, okay? This is a 3rd and 1. A call we're just going to run the ball, power run, right up the middle, okay? But instead, we're going to keep the same name for that play. But we're going to, instead of doing a run, okay, we're going to do a fake handoff and then sneak our tight end, have him do a weak block real quick and then release. And then jet up the middle and we're going to try to hit him 30 yards down the field. And so what happens is the quarterback goes into the play and he's going to make sure that defensive player that thinks he knows what's coming hears this audible. He's going to shout it out loud. He's going to give the hand signal for it. Here we go. Okay. And that defensive player then relays that information to the rest of his team. Run up the middle. And it looks like it's going to be a run up the middle, but it's not. And 30 or 40 yards later, that guy's still running. And so teams, they're changing that information, but it's just not a matter of changing it. Sometimes it's how do you exploit the information that other teams know? So it gets real interesting. It's a cat and mouse game, and it's a lot of fun if it's done well.
Yeah, and I know that we cover quite a bit just in this short little bit of time. There's so much more in the book, and before we got to do you justice. So again, tell the listener of the show what the book title is, where they can get it.
Yeah, so Spies on the Sidelines, the high-stakes world of NFL espionage. And you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Walmart, any of the major book retailers that sell books online, they're going to have it. You can go to my website, which is spiesonthesidelines.com, and you can find, anything you want to know about the book. I've pretty much got it all listed there. I've got all my social media handles, all the ways you can get the book. It's available in hardbound copy, digital, as well as audiobook. So, and the audiobook sells for about half the price of the regular book. So if you're looking to save a few bucks, then that's a great way to go.
Well, the better way to go is to get both the audiobooks, so when you're driving down the road, and then the hard copy, so you can have that sweet paper smell when you're reading through the chapters.
I like the way you're thinking.
All right. So before we get the last words of wisdom, this upcoming Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Eagles with Andy Reid going home, either give me a prediction or what you are hoping and rooting for.
Yeah, being a Broncos fan, I don't really have a dog in the fight. What I think, as much as I ever hate to go against the Chiefs lately, because man, with Patrick Mahomes betting against Magic Man, it's hard to go against him. But I really think the Eagles are going to take this Super Bowl. I know the Chiefs are a little banged up at some key positions, obviously including, at quarterback. I just feel like Eagles have been on fire. They had, I said after the draft, I'm living in Georgia. So I saw who the Eagles picked up, which were two of, the University of Georgia's best defensive players. And they got one of those guys in the 4th round, and he should have been like a top 15 pick, but he fell for medical reasons. And I saw who they got, and I was like, oh my gosh. Not only offensively are they going to be ridiculous, but defensively now, they're just going to be insane. And they have been. And so I think this is the Eagles' year. Patrick Mahomes may make me look stupid, though. I don't know. I hate betting against that guy because, versus the Bills. I remember versus the Bills last year, I was like, Bills are going to do it. Bills are going to do it. And then, he came back with that ridiculous drive. I don't know how many, 70 yards in like 25 seconds or whatever it was. I don't know. But I was just like, are you kidding me? So he's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it could go either way. It's a pick'em game somewhat at this point in time. I mean, I hold the right to reserve till after I actually record the intro and I talk about this. That's when I'll give you my official, Super Bowl pick. So last words of wisdom for the listener of the show, maybe through the lens of as they're about to watch the Super Bowl and thinking about spying during the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I guess what I'd say is that there is, we all know the game behind the game, okay? All the planning and the preparation. But there's a game behind that. And that's really what my book is all about. Because, before you can start putting game plans together, you've got to have information. And that battle for information, if you look at wars, if anyone's, a history buff, they've ever studied wars like, World War II and like D-Day landing. What an impact the intelligence game made on all of that. It's the same thing in football. Championships are won and lost. And one of the things that I saw during the research of my book that amazed me was how many big games, how many Super Bowls have been hugely impacted by the collection efforts and the spying that has gone on behind the scenes. And it's real. It's out there. And if you're interested in, kind of learning a bit more about that, and I think, most of us who are hardcore NFL fans like to know all about the different facets of the game. I think my book provides a pretty unique view into that world.
There you go. A little history about spying during the Super Bowl. Well, mostly leading up to the Super Bowl, that is. I wonder how much is going on right now in the locker rooms. Well, maybe not the locker rooms, but you know what I mean, the practice fields for the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Either way, it's set up to be a great game. I mean, if you look at it on paper, and even according to the bookies, this is basically a pick'em game. Very evenly matched in various realms. But I told you in this episode I'm going to make a prediction, but I do still hold the right to change my mind based on information given to me right up until kickoff. But until then, I guess I got to give you my prediction right now. So, as I'm doing that whole shuffling my fingers back and forth together and like maybe the Dr. Evil type of thing, I don't know. This is going to be my prediction. I do think the Chiefs are ultimately going to pull this one off because you know the whole story and everything. It's going to have to be one of those Mahomey magic moments. It's going to be a come behind victory. Last minute scoring drive, heading down the field. They're down by 7 points. I don't know, what is it like? Maybe 2 minutes left? 2 minutes and 32 seconds, let's call it that. In the middle of the drive, we're going to see Mahomes roll out, head for that first down. You could tell his ankle is bothering him because we all know he's got that high ankle sprain that's given into him. Maybe his shot's wearing off, something like that. Maybe something's going on. But he guts it out, scrambles for a first down, lowering his shoulder. He gets up, gimpy. Of course, Travis Kelce's the one that pulls him up because you know the story. Timeout is called. We go to commercial. Oh, yeah, we're coming back. You know, the announcers are talking about this whole great moments in sports history about the injured. We hear about the Michael Jordan flu game, Kerry Strug, the busting ankle, any other moments in sports history. Talk about. Mahomes hits Kelsey over the middle. Then he hits Tony. They get them both involved on the way down the field. We're inside the 10. But here's where the spying comes in, because Reed's inside cheesesteak guy let him know that he overheard Sirianni when he was sitting there eating one of his cheesesteaks over on the, those little carts to get outside the stadium, because he doesn't want just any food catered in. He had to go to his own guy. And he heard Sirianni saying, if it comes down to it, we'll let Mahomes go out for that pass because we'll be able to make up for it with our speed. Even if he catches the ball, we'll get it. We'll get to him. So 4 seconds is on the clock. Wait a minute. They're in the formation. Wait, is this the Philly special they're about to do? They have to cover Mahomes, right? They're not going to do this. I mean, we thought they weren't. Reed, he had that little bit of insider knowledge. He was wiping that cheesesteak off of his beard and everything. He knows that they're not going to cover Mahomes straight away. He has the cojones to call the Philly special. But this time, it's called, we'll just come up with something. I don't know. The Kansas City Barbecue Ankle Buster. Kelsey tosses that touchdown to Mahomes, and the crowd goes wild. Eagles 31, the Chiefs 30. All we got to do is get that extra point, and we're going into overtime, baby. Mahomes' ankle, though, it's so jacked up, he has to be carried back to the huddle. Wait a second. Back to the huddle? Yeah, you heard me. He's going back to the huddle. Reed has the stones. He's going for 2. He's not taking this thing into overtime. Mahomes is set up in shotgun formation. The snap. Hobbled, Mahomes is rolling out. He fires it to Kelsey in the back of the end zone for the conversion. Chiefs win! Chiefs win! Chiefs win! The announcers go on. They talk about this is the gutsiest performance you'll ever see, folks. And then scene. There you go. That's my prediction. Chiefs 32, Eagles 30 in a wild game ending in crazy fashion. Either way, I hope that you enjoy this year's Super Bowl, because I know I sure will. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Football History Dude. To make sure you're the first to get the next episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice and head on over to thefootballhistorydude.com for the show notes and more information on the history of the NFL. And remember, dudes, where we're going, we don't need roads.
Hi, this is Joe Ziemba, the host of When Football Was Football, here on the Sports History Network. I'm very pleased to announce that I will be partnering with the Sports History Network to give away 2 copies of my latest book called Bears vs. Cardinals, the NFL's Oldest Rivalry. To enter, just head over to the following link, sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. We hope you'll enjoy the numerous stories in the book, which is largely based on the newly released Dutch Tournament collection at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Dutch was the co-owner of the early Chicago Bears with George Halas and kept correspondence, financial records, and scouting reports, which now allow us to peek into the management of an NFL club during the first few years of the league's existence. Along the way, we'll meet unusual gridiron characters from years gone by, including a quarterback who could throw the ball farther behind his back than he could throwing it forward, a Bears lineman who was such a good tavern fighter that he decided to enter the boxing universe, and a Cardinals halfback who gave up the NFL rushing title by deciding to not show up for his team's final game of the season. And can we forget the time the Al Capone mob interrupted a Bears-Cardinals game? The new book was fun to research, and I hope you will enter our free contest today. Once the winners are selected, we'll be in touch regarding shipping as well as to inscribe the book personally for you. This might make a perfect gift for Mother's or Father's Day, or simply add it to your own personal collection. Once again, enter by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. Thank you and good luck.